for the sergeant. As we're coming up with a federal election in Canada and different elections happening all over the country, what advice would you give to U.S. groups in putting out their message on the positive things in Canadian models without reinforcing negative stereotypes within the country that there's no racism problem, that there's no problem with the police, that there's no right-wing criminal justice campaign? What advice would you give to us when we put out our materials?
Okay, I think I saw one. Oh my gosh. Okay, I think. Okay, go quickly.
Yeah, Peter Haynes, International Black Studies colleague, friend of Craig's. I just wanted to offer a comment, and that is, I attended a UN African Diaspora Heritage event, series of events back in September 4th and 5th, and one was the introduction of a new book, New Directions in Teaching and Learning about the Transatlantic Slave Trade and Slavery by our colleagues Dr. Paul Lovejoy and Dr. Benjamin Bowser. And half of the book deals with curricular issues. The other half deals with the contemporary psychological consequences of the African slave trade and slavery. And a lot of these writings have been done by actual psychologists. Dr. Benjamin Bowser is a sociologist, and he has a 20-page PowerPoint presentation that helps to, I think, really introduce people to this contemporary psychological consequences of the African slave trade and slavery. And so it looks at, in a nutshell, those 20 pages encourage you to really read the book, and it shows how people of African descent treat each other intentionally or unintentionally as a result of the African slave trade and slavery. Also, how people of non-African descent treat each other intentionally or unintentionally as a result of the slave trade and slavery. And then how people of non-African descent treat people of African descent intentionally or unintentionally as a result of the slave trade and slavery. So one of the things referenced earlier was the connection to wearing the pants, below a certain position. That's all part of that. But I think if this can be shared with policymakers, educators, and others, and Dr. Benjamin Bowser, the co-editor of that book, he said, Peter, you can share this widely as possible with any colleagues you think would be helpful. So I think that's something for the White House Task Force, for the new Attorney General, and my cousin, just on the law enforcement side, was a colleague of Eric Holder. My cousin is Zachary Carter, and he used to be the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, the same position that Loretta Lynch was in prior to her becoming U.S. Attorney General.
Okay, thank you so very much for that comment. I think we just have a couple more, and then we're going to have them give their closing remarks and hopefully incorporate answers to the questions. So you mentioned books. I just want to remember, I think you have a couple of your books here. You have to be white by Sunday.
A couple of editions, a couple of copies of the second edition, You Better Be White, and also The Journey Continues, which is the running chronology of significant events of Black history in Atlantic Canada, from Matthew Acosta in 1605 right up until 2010. They're on the side on the table somewhere.
Okay, okay.
Not to take away from the contextualizing issues of the Black Atlantic, which we must always consider, I would like to raise the issue of militarization, the psychology of militarization, police departments as closed systems and cultures, the selection of police officers, PTSD, moral injury in war, the question of the training or use of weapons versus communications, and the phenomena of the inability of some vets who end up on police forces because they're looking for an occupation where they don't have to be separated from their weapon. And I wanted to know if you gentlemen thought that was a legitimate concern.
Okay, Kara, I think you were, Tanya, I think you were the last one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I too had a question about militarization. Tanya Bennett with ACLU, sorry. And so wanted to get some thoughts on this military weapon, these military weapons and equipment. Are there certain items that law enforcement should just not have, whether it be grenades, grenade launchers, non-resistant air vehicles, certainly would appreciate your thoughts on that. And then also wanted to get your reaction to the widespread calls for body-worn cameras here in the United States, and then also if Canada has any sort of successes or failures with those cameras that we should know about.
Okay, well, here we go.